Welcome back to another episode of the Shout at the Devils podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Amoia. I run Devils Report on Instagram as well as write for the Hockey Writers. I'm here alongside Justin Brady, who runs Devils Fanatics on Instagram. And since we last spoke to you all, things have taken a turn for the worse for the Devils. I mean, it's really night and day. They've won 2 of their last 11 games, basically free falling. Their scoring has basically been cut in half, and they weren't scoring a ton of goals to begin with. It was their defense that was helping them prevail. But the production wise, goal scoring, they've basically been one of the worst teams in the league over the last 11 games, and there's been a lot that's gone wrong. We're obviously going to dissect a lot of that, but it's certainly crazy how just in a couple weeks' time things could completely change. So, Justin, what are you thinking?
Yeah, no, it's the big issue right now is the goal scoring, not being able to capitalize on your power play opportunities, any chances that you get, being too sloppy with the puck, being too cute, and that's really causing the scoring to really dwindle down to under 2 goals a game in this 11-game stretch with which they have gone 2-6-3. And so practically, if you want to look at it this way, 2-9 in those games. 2 wins out of those 11 games, that's not good at all. And luckily enough, the Devils are still second place right now in the division, but they have a lot of games ahead of many teams, and a lot of teams are starting to catch up. So it's becoming an issue now, and scoring 1 goal in a game is not going to do enough. Maybe for some teams it does if you have an elite goalie. And don't get me wrong, Jacob Markstrom's been really outstanding this season, but you cannot rely on him or even Jake Allen to give up 0 goals every single game. It's not reality, and it's a tough place with which the Devils are in right now. And it's like at first people were blaming the bottom six for the lack of production, but now it's the top six. It's really just the whole team together who are really just not producing at all. The top guys, all their numbers have really gone down as of late. Jack Hughes, Nico Heischer, Bratt, Timo Meyer, just everybody. And even the bottom six obviously still hasn't been that great, but they've had their moments here and there. The last game, Tatar got on the board, which is his first goal in like 2 months. And then Cotter scored a couple games ago, and I mean he was on a bit of a heater there, but kind of died down. So other than that, it's just like there's really no offensive production. And even look at the guys from on the blue line, like Dougie Hamilton has 1 goal in his last 21 games. Luke Hughes is not doing much offensively, and those are really like your two like to go guys when it comes to bring in some offense from that blue line, and they are not getting the job done there either. So it's just you see a mix of problems going on, and it's really the biggest reason for the Devils' struggles right now is you're not scoring enough goals, and you're not going to score any goals in the NHL. You're not going to win games, plain and simple. And don't get me wrong, there's so many other problems that are lingering with this team right now, like the defensive breakdowns, the horrible giveaways, and stuff like that. And we can get into that later on in the episode. But the big problem right now is the lack of goal production.
Yeah, I have some stats I want to rattle off. The Devils' big four, so that's Jack Hughes, Jesper Bratt, Nico Heischer, and Timo Meyer. Prior to this 11-game skid, they were collectively scoring 0.4 goals per game. Since then, it's been 0.2, so that's quite literally cut in half. Then their points per game went from 1.01 to 0.55. So again, basically in half. I mean, from your star players, they need to be better. And Sheldon Keefe said that yesterday. He said, plain and simple, our top players need to be better. And that's true. But with that being said, I find it very hard to imagine that at least some of it isn't because they're putting pressure on themselves, because the Devils get absolutely zero secondary scoring. Aside from those four, you have Stefan Mason, then you have Paul Cotter and Dawson Mercer. Occasionally, they each have 10 goals, so I'll give them that. It's a decent enough pace for bottom six players. But
Plot in there as well.
yes, you're right. You're right. Sorry, Palat as well has definitely been playing well. But aside from that, everyone else is basically a black hole, and I have the stats right here as well. Um, there's prior to this stretch, I call them the group of six. Those players are, I have them right here: Tomas Tatar, Eric Holla, Curtis Lazar, Justin Dowling, Curtis McDermott, and Nate Bastian. Those players have combined for 33 points in 185 combined games. Prior to this stretch, they were scoring 0.21 points per game, which isn't good in of itself. But since then, it's dropped 48% to 0.11 points per game. So that's essentially 1 point every 9 games from all of them. And that's not going to cut it. Um you look at a guy like Tomas Tatar, his scoring's down 30% from last season. Eric Halla, it's down 43% from last season. Curtis Lazar, 76% from last season. And in fact, with Tatar, the Devils brought him in hoping to replicate his season from 2 seasons ago. From then, his production's down over 56%. I mean, we're not talking like 5%, 10% here. These are massive numbers where, I mean, it's almost unexplainable where their scoring has just completely disappeared. Um, they need more than that. You could get by with like one of Curtis Lazar, Justin Dowling in the lineup, but when you have all those guys consistently in the lineup night in and night out, it's not really fair because then that does put pressure on the top guys, and it's like if you're Jack Hughes or Nico Hischier or Timo Meier, it's like if we're not on tonight, we're getting no help. We're getting shut out. And that's the reason the Devils have been shut out, what, 6, 7 times now, something like that. Um, it's just not good enough. And I asked Sheldon Keefe about that the other day. Do you feel that the lack of depth scoring has caused the top players to try to do too much? And his exact words were, "That's a bullshit excuse."
Mm.
But at the same time, what's he gonna say? Like he can't go grow a new a new depth forward in his backyard. Like he has to work with the roster he has. And if I were the coach, I'd say the exact same thing. Obviously the guys are working hard. It's not like they want to have their scoring completely diminish, but that's the reality right now. So yes, the star players do absolutely have to be better, but at the same time, it just looks like they're pressing. I mean, Jack Hughes turning the puck over a lot more, Jesper Bratt fanning on a lot of shots, Timo Meier missing the net a lot. Even Nico Hischier's bobbling pucks more than he does. Like, just they're not connected, and that's the exact word that Sheldon Keefe used to me. He said they're disconnected, and you could just tell that on the ice. Like, it's a complete 180. And Keefe did have a good quote also later on. He said it's times like these, something like it's times like these that make you realize you're not as good as you were, but you're also not as bad as you look right now. And that's true because look, the Devils aren't going to be winning 2 out of 11 games the rest of the season. Like that, they're way too good of a team for that. Even last season, they were basically around 500 with all the injuries and goaltending problems and everything else. Jake, just plain and simple, Jacob Markstrom is good enough to say he plays 80% of games the rest of the way. He's good enough to keep them in every single game. These have not been blowouts. Look how many of them have been in overtime. They have all, with the exception of the LA Kings game, so one of those 11 games, have been very close games and very winnable games for the Devils. So it's not like they're getting blown out like a team like, say, maybe the Sharks or the Blackhawks, where it's like, oh, like they're just not competitive. Like, it's just a few minor things, and if they're able to tap into that depth scoring, possibly add someone, I mean, they might have to change. I think they have to change the lines too. Just they need a shake up for sure. But anyway, regardless, they just simply are not clicking at all right now, and we're seeing the results in the standings. They were around, I think, they bounced between first and third for a few weeks there in the league in terms of points percentage, and now they've fallen all the way to 13th. I mean, that's just a crazy skid, but thankfully for them, according to Money Puck, they still have a 94.3% chance to make the playoffs because of the cushion they've built for themselves, and also because 3 of those losses in this skid have been in overtime, and those points are important. That's something for as much as it sucks for the group losing those games. Last season, they couldn't get it done at all. How many times they lost in regulation, couldn't get the games to overtime. So just that alone is a big thing, even though if you're listening to this, you probably don't want to hear it. But look at what the Islanders did the last season. The loser points are a huge thing. And regardless, I mean, just the way they started, the Devils, I think, deserve to be in the playoffs. It's not like the entire team sucks now. It's just a rough skid. And look, it happened to the Panthers. Both the Panthers and the Vegas Golden Knights, the years they won the cup, had exact stretches like this where they won only 2 of 11 games during the season. The Knights were earlier in the season, I believe, and the Panthers was like 2 weeks before the playoffs started. So it happens, but the Devils need, whether it's line changes, possible external acquisition, something needs to change because right now they just they kind of look lost right now.
So I agree and disagree with you. So I think part I agree with is change is needed. Personally, I would change the top six. I would put Timo Meyer, Nico Heischer, and Jesper Bratt on a line together on that first line. They really connected well late of last season. That last 20 games or so, they were really producing a lot. And I would experiment, see how that goes again. And then in just 10 minutes of play, I saw a stat that Jack Hughes, Dawson Mercer, and who's the other guy I'm missing? Palat. They were really producing well in just 10 minutes of play this season together. They haven't been together much. So I would experiment with that as well. And then bottom six, I don't know. I think a trade is needed there. I'm looking at a guy like Trent Frederick, for example. He had a really good offensive season last year. His numbers have dwindled down a little bit, but nothing to be concerned about. He's just kind of like another Paul Cotter in a way, where he's really just an all-around player. He's very physical, and that's something that any team could use more of. I know the Devils have been a much more physical team this season, but there's nothing wrong with providing more of a physical aspect to your bottom six and providing more energy and more of a spark to that bottom six. And he could really connect well with a guy like Cotter or Eric Hall when he comes back. Hopefully, Hall comes back soon. He was placed on the injured reserve, so no update on him at the moment. So we'll see how that all folds. But Trent Frederick would be a good addition. There's other guys out there. Also, just want to get this out there. JT Miller is not coming to the Devils. I want to make that
I don't
clear
think
and
so.
simple. It's not happening. I know people are excited about it. Like, oh, yeah, let's get Miller. I know he was actually almost a Ranger the other day, but the trade fell through. But according to Elliot Friedman, he doesn't see the Devils as a trade candidate for him. And I don't think that the Devils should go out and trade for a guy that is 31 years old, has a major cap hit of $8 million a season. His numbers have declined compared to last season. That's not, and he's a center. Where are you gonna put him on the third line as a center? JT Miller, you're not gonna do that. You could put him on a wing, but I don't know. But I wouldn't get JT Miller. I don't think he's gonna help this team solve problems because the big problem right now is just I think is more providing a spark to the team and really getting them going. And Trent Frederick is a guy who I think could do that. But we'll save that for another episode because obviously the trade deadline is coming up soon. The one thing I am going to disagree with you is, though, at this point, you lose 2 out of 11 games. I know teams go on very long slumps, but this is starting to seem more than a slump. At least to me, it is. It's just the common problems that have really recurred through this bad stretch, which is the lack of goal scoring, the really bad takeaways, giveaways. Excuse me. Jack Hughes has been really careless with the puck as of late. You could say the same thing about his brother. And as much as Jack Hughes does so many great things for the Devils, the fact that he's like been really careless with the puck as of late has been hurting the team more than his offensive production or the way he plays on the penalty kill. He's really been hurting the team in many ways. You look at a game like against the Flyers, they lost that game because of two big giveaways there. And I know one goal is not enough, and I know Sheldon Keefe said, "Oh, we realistically should have won that game 1-0." And honestly, he's right. One goal is not going to get it done, but you have really two bad giveaways there, and that leads to goals. So that's another big factor right there that the Devils really have to work on in their defensive breakdowns. They have been a little bit better over these last two games against the Senators and Flyers, but still not good enough. It still has to be better, and I don't know. I don't want to say like they peaked in December, but it definitely it's not looking promising right now if you're a Devils fan. But I do believe if they change things up, and Sheldon Keefe hasn't changed anything up as of yet. I feel like a change is needed. Provide a spark to this young Devils team and see where it can go. I believe they can get back to where they were playing back in December, but something has to change, plain and simple.
Yeah, I mean, respectfully, I don't know how you can look at any of the last few games and say the defense hasn't been good enough. This entire stretch as a whole, they're still 12th in the league, so that's the upper half of the league in goals against. They've been giving up 1, 2 goals a night. I mean, no defense is going to be perfect. They were playing to a historic level, giving up 15 shots a night, 14 shots a night. Obviously, that wasn't going to repeat. They're not going to be perfect. So yeah, they haven't been as good as they were in December, but the defense has still been an above average National Hockey League defense. And I mean, there were stretches, it seemed like, where they gave up like zero odd man rushes. And that's just not going to happen with the amount of skill that's in the National Hockey League. That things are going to happen. But the defense has been fine enough. Yes, they haven't been as good as they were, but they're still playing to a borderline elite level in terms of stifling the opposition. And you have Jacob Markstrom who's playing super well also. But like you said, you need that goal support, and the Devils are just not getting it. And that could also have an impact on the defense where they feel as if they have to be perfect now, because if they make one single mistake, the game could be over. Because even if it's, say, 1-0 with 30 minutes left, who knows if the Devils are going to score that goal? I mean, it's like a miracle, basically, that back-to-back games they got quote-unquote fourth-line goals. Tomas Tatar scored and Dougie Hamilton scored, but the fourth line got assists, so I don't even know if you could call that a fourth-line goal. Sheldon Keefe did. But yeah, it just completely out of sorts. I'm still gonna say that I believe it's a slump. Like I said, this has happened to two recent Stanley Cup champions of an exact similar stretch, and even in terms of the goal scoring production, the turnovers. I looked at all those stats this morning. I don't have them with me, but they were very almost identical stretches from those two teams that won the cup. So that's not me sitting here and being like, "Oh, the Devils are turning it around and winning the cup," but it happens. There's so much parity in this NHL. Keith has said it a bunch of times. Any team could beat any team on any night. I mean, the Sharks beat the LA Kings like 6-0 or something like that in the Kings' own barn. Like they, everyone is so highly skilled. It's not like it used to be where, like, how often do you truly see blowouts? They happen, but not too often. Um and sometimes it's the underdog blowing the favorite out. I mean, there's just the NHL as a whole, just insanely talented. It's definitely not like it used to be. Jake Allen even said that yesterday. He was like the NHL is just not the same. It's definitely changed from when I got into the league. Um, but yeah, just a lot of I feel like disconnected. The word Keith used is definitely the best word to use, because they are. I mean, they're just not clicking. Passes are off the tape. They don't look confident out there, really. I think that's what it comes down to. And who would be when you're in this kind of stretch? But the good thing is, I'm around them in the locker room sometimes, and they seem to have pretty high spirits. It's not like they're like getting down on themselves. Or, like, they're confident in the group. They know that they can win in long stretches. They did it for most of the season up until this recent stretch. So I think they'll climb out of it, but like you said, they definitely need a spark.
I think they will too. A spark is needed. I think another problem you look at is, and I am gonna, this is why I say the defense hasn't been good enough, is when they score a goal and they'll be up 1-0, then they'll have a defensive breakdown right after that. Is the problem is for them as of late this stretch, which is why like they're losing so many games by one goal, is they cannot extend their leads ever in games. It's always like, all right, they're up 1-0, then 2 minutes later it's 1-1. And then, oh, they'll be up 2-1. And you get a game like against the Maple Leafs, prime example. They had a 1-0 lead, a 2-1 lead, a 3-2 lead, and they blew all those leads, and that led to the overtime loss. Very bad line change by Luke Hughes in that. So it's just things like that is really, really different than what they were doing earlier on in the season. And it's important that you like, yes, in the third periods this season, they're what 21-0-2 in maintaining leads, but I'm talking about earlier on in games, they have to do a better job in doing that, because they're finding themselves in many close games where I don't want to say like as you said, Daniel, like any game, any team could ever win in the NHL. Like it happens. The Sharks beat the Kings, of course, but looking at the schedule, the Flyers and the Senators, I expect at least one win out of those games, and I'm not taking away anything from those teams, but there's a bunch of teams in this stretch that the Devils should have beaten. The Sharks, they should have beaten. The Ducks, they should have beaten. And it's just all coming down to these fundamental mistakes late in games or earlier on in games where the Devils lose by one goal and they're not able to finish these games. And I think that's not a big thing to be concerned about. And that's why I'm optimistic they'll be back, because they're just not finding ways to win these games. And once they start doing that, then their confidence will start building, and then they can start really stringing wins together like they were doing so oftenly earlier on in the season. I think the big thing that would help right now is a win streak. And I can't stress enough, they haven't had a win streak of more than 3 games in over 2 years now. 2 years. That's a little ridiculous. And at some point or another, something is gonna have to give. And that might just be the thing that this team needs to really get them going. And going into the rest of the season, they have like 30-ish games left. And at this point, you're gonna have to start stringing some wins together, and it's not gonna be any more. You can't really play any more 500 hockey because the odds you make the playoffs is maybe like a 50-50 shot there. Because a lot of teams are up and coming. The Blue Jackets are up and coming. The Rangers have been playing much better hockey. The Hurricanes are still doing their thing. The Capitals are taking a commanding lead in the division right now, and all these teams are starting to come up. The Canadians have won their last 9 out of 11. So I'm not trying to scare people, but it's just the reality right now that the Devils are in, that their division lead is only, or not division lead, their standings lead from the closest team out of the playoff spot is 7 points, and they have a lot of games in hand. So they're gonna have to get it going. It can't be another 4 out of the 5 next games losses. Like, they have to figure it out, and they have to figure it out fast. I know there's a lot of season left, but you can't keep on letting these mistakes drag you down with the lack of goal scoring, the bad turnovers, the just everything. And one last thing I wanna, before you go ahead, Daniel, and conclude the episode, is this is not on the goaltending at all. Jacob Markstrom has been outstanding. Jake Allen, when he's been in that, has been okay, decent. And you can't point the finger at them, man. It's funny enough how we look at last season. That was the big problem we were talking about is, oh yeah, the Devils goaltending is a big problem. They're able to score 4 or 5 goals a game at times, and the goaltending lets them down. So now it's kind of a whole 360 this season where the goaltending has bailed them out, keep them in close games, and then the team's just not able to deliver, whether it's in overtime, which they're 2-5 this season. That's a little concerning. Got to get that going and figured out. So it's just a matter of winning these close games, and once they start doing that, I'm confident they'll get back to Devils hockey.
Yeah, well, so much of what you said just kind of further proves the point of the parity in the league. You said the Canes are doing their thing. The Canes are playing sub 500 hockey in for over a month now. That just like it happens to every team, and they had such a big standings cushion as well, where no one really even talks about it or cares. Um, the Flyers and Sens too. I mean, yes, the Devils, if they want to be a contender, they should, like you said, be taking points from those teams. But with that being said, I believe both of those teams were in the top 10 in points percentage in the last month, playing very good hockey. Um, the Leafs game you mentioned, the defense maybe sometimes lets a goal right after the Devils score a goal. Yes, that did happen in the Leafs game, but
Can't happen. That stuff. It can't happen.
I do think that game's a bit of an outlier. I think that more speaks to the offense's inability to build on their lead rather than the defense giving it up, because sometimes you'll see, say, the Devils get a goal in the first period, and play goes on for a while, and say late in the second, the other team ties it up because the Devils weren't able to get a goal. So yes, technically the defense did give up that next goal, but the offense probably had plenty of chances and couldn't capitalize. I mean, how many times have the Devils gotten goalied this year? A lot of times by goalies who are not great goalies in the National Hockey League.
You look at
Many times.
Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, look at yesterday, for example. They went against what was it, Forsberg, and his numbers were absolutely horrendous entering this game. Another goalie like Bennington, his numbers were horrendous when the Devils played him back in December. And then even against Philadelphia, I think Earson's stats weren't the best by any means, and he only gave up 1 goal. And I don't want to like really say, oh yeah, these goalies like played great. I mean, they played decent games, but I think it's more of the Devils just not really connecting well. I think disconnected is really the perfect word to describe this hockey team right now. Their chemistry is just not looking good at all right now. And yeah, it's just really the sloppy passes, trying to do too much at times. And then when they do shoot, sometimes they hesitate and take too long, and the shots end up getting blocked. So it's just like they're just not executing well in anything related to offense right now. And it stinks right now because it's just as I said before, just total 360 of like what's going on right now. It's just they were scoring so at a high rate earlier on in the season. They were doing really well, scoring 3, 4 goals a game around that rate. And then now it's just like, oh, we're lucky to get 2 goals a game right now. And that's just tough. And you're not going to win games consistently when you're doing that. So hopefully they figure it out. I'm confident that they will, but it's just like, you got to get it going, right? You can't just keep on letting this keep on happening, because I believe it's more than a slump. And if this keeps on going, then it's just like, all right, well, so the Devils are starting to fall apart. And I hate to say that, but it's just like, it's the reality, because they have to figure it out. 9 out of 11 games have been losses. Got to figure it out fast.
Yeah, well, you said the offense, but even when they were playing well, I think I wrote this on December 21st. The Devils were scoring about 0.3 fewer goals per game than last season. So they weren't exactly like, and look at all the injuries they had last season too. So they weren't like lighting up the score sheet, but the thing was they were winning games 3-1, 3-0, 2-0, 2-1. So it made it and the power play was also so on point that it just felt like they were constantly putting pucks in the back of the net. But even strength, they really weren't doing anything special. There, overall, it was a much better improvement from last season, because I said this on a previous episode. Say you're scoring 0.25 fewer goals per game, but you're giving up a whole goal less per game, then obviously that's an improvement. You're winning more games. So it really doesn't matter. But the point is, the offense wasn't exactly this like high flying, filling your net with pucks offense, but the defense was just playing to a historic level, which again, you can't expect them to play that well for that long. But the bottom line is the numbers, like I said before, the star players scoring has basically been cut in half, and that's what's really unacceptable. But also the bottom six literally almost never scoring is also equally unacceptable as well. So it's kind of a team effort here. Um, you mentioned the block shots as well. The Flyers, I think, had a season high block shots. It was like 34. That's pretty unheard of. The Devils would probably win the shin pad Olympics. Just
Yeah.
constantly putting pucks in the other team's skates in their shin pads. And you also mentioned, compared to last season, it's almost weird how everything flip-flopped. So last season, the Devils were not a healthy team. Now they are. Last season, the goaltending sucked. Now it's great. Last season, the defense was okay, but now it's great. But last season, the offense was pretty good, and now it's not.
Yeah.
So it's just like none of those things stayed the same. It was like the things that needed to get better did, but then things that were already good got worse. So it's just strange how things work. Sports are very strange. They often make zero sense. But yeah, the like you said, that they just need to turn it around. That they need to string together some wins, like you said. That's going to be the thing that's ultimately going to dig them out of it, just as it did 2 seasons ago when they had that franchise record season. I think they lost 6, 7 straight home games. Damon Severson gets an overtime winner against the Rangers, and things start
Yep.
going up from there.
Yep.
So
Just a spark. That's all you need right now.
they need that spark. So whether that's line changes, whether that's an external acquisition, whether that's someone, say, like Timo Meyer stepping up and having one of those runs like he did in March where he's scoring basically almost every night. However it comes, the Devils are going to cherish it and it's going to help them in the long run. But I think this could almost possibly be a blessing in disguise as well, because, well, two things actually. Number one, it shows Tom Fitzgerald, who has made it pretty clear that he knows of the depth scoring issue and he's going to try to get it fixed. It shows that this is unacceptable. This team is not yet ready to win a Stanley Cup. And number two, for all we know, right now, it looks like if things stand, the Devils are going to play the Hurricanes no matter what. I mean, the Capitals are just blowing past everyone. So it looks like that's how the first round of the playoffs would shake up. But for all you know, maybe the Devils end up slipping to, say, a top wild card. They avoid the Hurricanes. The Hurricanes get bounced in a fluke in the first round, and the Devils have an easier path. I mean, who knows? I'm not saying a bank on that, obviously. If you're the Devils, you just want to win games. That's priority number one, because the playoffs aren't even a guarantee. I think at one point last season, they were at like 90% to make the playoffs, and it never happened.
Yeah.
So You just want to win games if you're the Devils, but things happen to work in weird ways sometimes. But we'll start paying more attention to how those standings are unfolding in the coming weeks. But for right now, like you said, spark, that's the thing. And disconnected is the key word. They're certainly disconnected right now. Someone needs to find a way to reconnect them. Maybe put them in rice if that works. I mean, whatever seems to rejuvenate them. But right now they're certainly disconnected, so they
Yeah.
gotta figure that out.
Yeah, just one last thing. They have 8 more games until they get that 2-week break, for the Four Nations tournament. You need some momentum going into that break. You can't go into that break being like, "Oh my god, we're really falling apart," and stuff like that. You need something going for you going into that break, and you have some very winnable games coming up. The Bruins, they're not playing really that good of hockey right now. They're maybe average at best. The Canadians, yes, they're heating up right now, but it's still a winnable game. And then you got the Flyers back to back. It's a home and home against them. Then the Sabres and Penguins, who are two of the worst teams in hockey. And then Vegas, Montreal. So just a lot of winnable games I just named there. And start stringing some wins there. Stop playing down to these average, lower tier teams. Start getting points against them, right? So let's hope they do that in this stretch coming up and go into this Four Nations break with a bit of a more positive and something to give more Devils fans something to be excited about for the rest of the season.
Yeah, definitely. So, any last words?
Nah, that's it, man. All right, look, I just hope they get back to it. Some people are hitting that panic button. I'm not hitting that yet, but you can be concerned. You have every right to be concerned if you're a Devils fan because the product on the ice is definitely not what it was a month ago. But I'm confident enough that once they get that spark, that as me and Daniel mentioned several times now, that spark will come and bam, this team will be right back to playing that Devils hockey that they were really getting accustomed to playing back in December during that hot run that they were on.
Yeah, definitely. So we thank you all for listening. Gonna be very interesting to see how these next few games shake up. Just they're in dire need of some points right now to restore the vibes. We appreciate all your support as always. Stay tuned to our socials. You could find them in the description. And we'll catch you all on the next episode. Peace out.
Peace.